It's great to be here. Thanks everyone for joining this session. Joan and I are very excited to share with you some ideas about supporting your diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda through workplace-based savings. We're from Commonwealth. We're a mission-driven fintech that's really focused on expanding access to retirement security through quality workplace retirement plans. And although we're not experts in DEI, we have been part of a conversation in our industry, retirement benefits, over the last 5 or 6 years, really about making our retirement system more inclusive and more equitable. And we brought to that some experience, quite a bit of experience serving a very diverse client base, focusing on modest income workers, focusing on precarious workers. And we wanted to share some of that experience and some of the data that we've learned to try and connect up the conversation, that's the growing conversation about DEI, with the conversation about financial wellness, financial health, and financial inclusion that we've learned from some of our retirement experience. So we hope from today's conversation, you'll come away with a better understanding of that connection, as well as some practical ideas that you can take as an employer for building a more inclusive workplace through workplace-based savings.
So we'll start by talking about some of the gaps that currently exist. So representation, power, and income gaps are all kind of important ongoing conversations in HR circles around DEI. Today, we're going to focus on something we're calling the wealth gap, specifically retirement wealth and how that impacts different groups and people. Where we'll start is the gender retirement gap. So we know that women are paid less than men, and we can assume that this kind of impacts their life, quality of life in the present. But, are we really considering what does this mean for their future and for their retirement? What we're seeing here on this slide is that even when women work longer and save only a little bit less than men, they're still retiring with a significant wealth gap of 30% less wealth than men in their retired years.
So in addition to there being a retirement wealth gap in terms of gender, there's also a significant retirement wealth gap in terms of race. There's much better data in the US. So for example, this is a recent study by Morningstar that just came out last week that shows that the median retirement savings for Black households is less than 4 times, or the median savings for white households is more than 4 times greater than that for Black households. And there's also a large gap for Latino households as well. Unfortunately, in Canada, we do not systematically collect data on these kinds of gaps. That is now changing. And the early data that we have suggests that there's a similar gap in Canada for marginalized communities, including Indigenous Canadians. And hopefully over the years to come, we'll get more information and data about that wealth gap in terms of racial inequity. We do have better data on immigration status. So we know, for example, that there is a disparity in terms of who has a pension between recently arrived immigrants to Canada and people that were born in Canada. So this chart basically shows that if you're Canadian born, you're about twice as likely to have a pension at work than if you arrived in Canada less than 10 years ago. And we know that the gap here for women is even greater than it is for men. One of the points that we wanted to make is this is not just about a gap in income. The retirement gap is not just because people are earning less because they are women, because they are people of color. It's also because people are less likely to have access to quality workplace benefits. So this chart basically breaks down by income decile how likely people are to have access to a workplace pension. And what it shows you is that the bottom 30% of earners, those in the bottom 30% of income earners, have about a 1 in 5 chance of having access to a workplace pension, whereas the top 30% have about a 3 in 5 chance. So the chance of them having access to a workplace pension is about 3 times greater. So this helps compound some of the other inequities that we see, because we know that people who are earning in the bottom 30% are disproportionately likely to be women, likely to be people of color, likely to be Indigenous Canadians, and they're also less likely to have access to these, really important benefits for building retirement wealth.
So a group that we have had the opportunity to work with over the past few years are personal support workers. And we see in this group that there are these experiences that we just looked at intersect to kind of compound the problem. So this is the majority of personal support workers in Canada are women of color. and they are underpaid and don't have access to a kind of typical workplace plan. So we should also consider that this is a physically demanding job. These people may not have the option to work the 2 additional years that other women are working to compensate for this retirement gap. So what we see here is these people are more likely to retire in poverty or experience poverty in their retirement. And now COVID has disproportionately affected people. So we know that not everybody is having the same experience in this pandemic. So while some people are able to save so much they don't know what to do with it, others who are already earning less have actually stopped saving, and their retirement income is going to be impacted by this.
So we've talked a lot about the different elements of what Joan described as the retirement wealth gap, right? By gender, by race, by immigration status, how that is compounded by the lower socioeconomic status of people. And also about how COVID has made this disparity even wider, likely. The good news is that there is something employers can do about this through the very proven and effective vehicle of workplace-based savings programs. And these are effective for a number of reasons. One is that when people have access to payroll-based savings, we know they're much more likely to save. There's data that shows that people with payroll-based savings are 15 times more likely to save than people without that kind of access. We also know that incentives, such as employer matches for savings, can be a very powerful way of encouraging people, especially first-time savers, to start to accumulate that retirement wealth. We also know that a good workplace retirement plan can be much more cost-effective as a way of building retirement wealth than what people would typically do if they're on their own, even if they have the benefit of financial advice. We did a study a couple of years ago with the Hoop Pension Plan, one of the world's leading pension plans, along with the National Institute on Aging, and we looked at quantifying what is the lifetime value of participating in a workplace retirement plan. And what we found is for the average typical middle-class Canadian worker, this could be worth up to $800,000 over the course of a lifetime, basically in making it much more affordable and much more attainable to build that level of retirement security that's necessary to maintain your standard of living in retirement. So this can be a huge benefit over longer periods of time because it allows people's savings to go much, much farther than they're likely to go on their own. Unfortunately, the way our retirement system is built, the way many employer-sponsored retirement plans are built, they're not as inclusive as they could be. There are large gaps, and the people that are most likely to need the help tend to be the people that are most likely to be left out of the system. Most retirement benefits, most of our tax system tends to disproportionately benefit people that are already high earners, that are male, that are white, and that probably already have significant savings, and for whom the benefit of a workplace plan is maybe a little bit less than someone who is saving for the first time. So we've come up with some ways that we think are practical ways, 6 ways that you can look to build a more inclusive retirement plan, retirement program within your workplace. Whether you don't have a plan at all today or whether you have a mature plan, there should be something in here that you can bring back, hopefully, to your workplace to look at making a more inclusive plan and narrow that retirement wealth gap that Joan and I were talking about. So we'll go through each one of these. The first is to take a look at your existing program and review it from an equity perspective. If you don't have a plan today, you should really think about setting one up because it can be quite powerful. Even if you're a smaller employer, that's now become possible to offer something. If you do offer something, it's worth taking a look at who's benefiting from it, who's covered, looking at it from a gender perspective, looking at it from a race and an income perspective to see who is benefiting from it, who is actually enrolled or signed up, and who is getting the most of the benefit if you're putting in a match of that match. You'll also want to take a look at, is it actually tailored for the needs of those modest earners? People make less than $50,000 a year, because there's some unique considerations there that you'll want to keep in mind. The second item is to expand eligibility if you can. If you have the budget to do it, if you have the ability to do it, there are often people that are left out of these programs because they're newer, because they're part-time, because they're frontline and maybe lower earning, and there's a presumption that may not be correct that these folks are not interested in savings. And there may even be creative ways for you to involve contractors or gig workers that are part of your organization or that help your organization in a savings program. So taking an inclusive view of who's eligible for the program can be one way of narrowing that wealth gap. There are actually billions of dollars of government benefits that go unclaimed every year. And because savings programs tend to have a financial education component to them already, because you're educating people on TFSAs and RSPs and CPP, you might want to think about adding additional education about other government benefits that your employees could access that really benefit, especially those that are living on more modest incomes. Things like the Canada Learning Bond, which is an incentive of up to $2,000 for opening an RESP account, and yet millions of Canadian children that are eligible for these don't claim them. There are pretty easy ways to help people access these government benefits or learn about the benefits of tax filing that can be effectively free money to the employer while also addressing some of the inequities and narrowing that wealth gap that we talked about.
The other thing you'll want to consider is adding a TFSA component to your group retirement plan. So many people don't know that the TFSA was originally designed specifically as a retirement savings vehicle for Canadians who are earning less than $50,000 per year. And this is because it will allow these modest income earners to maximize out their government benefits in retirement, whereas saving in an RRSP could negatively impact the government benefits they're eligible for in retirement. So saving in the TFSA could really increase their quality of life in retirement. And the other thing is it does remove a barrier for people who may be worried about putting their money in an RRSP and not having access to those funds in an emergency. The other thing you would want to consider is doing a fixed dollar matching as opposed to a percentage-based match. So typically there's the 3, 4, 5% match to any sort of employee contributions. But people tend to think about money in dollars as opposed to percentages. So this is kind of an easier concept for them to understand and apply to their everyday life. It also means that when you're using a percentage, it means that the benefit is greater for those who are earning a higher income. So it's a greater benefit for those who are already likely to be better off in retirement to start. So using a fixed dollar match can really help those who are earning a bit less. And then the final thing you'll want to do is make sure that your plan is following inclusive plan design principles. So these are things you can look for in any plan you're currently providing or thinking about providing. So is it simple? Is it avoiding financial jargon? Is it providing simple, personalized suggestions for your employees? Does the education go beyond kind of general financial literacy? The TFSA example we just discussed, we just learned about, is something that anybody could take action on right away by just redirecting their savings. So you really want to look for those educational opportunities that are focused on an action people can take. Guidance for retirement planning. Retirement planning can be overwhelming for people. Your plan should provide some simple guidance on key decisions like how much should I save? In addition to being people feeling overwhelmed with retirement planning, something at Commonwealth we hear a lot is people feel guilt or embarrassment around how little they've saved, how unprepared they are for retirement. So your plan should really encourage people and make them feel confident about their retirement, as opposed to feeling these kind of negative emotions like guilt or shame. You also want to provide support for anybody who needs help enrolling. So the greatest barrier is getting people to start participating. Once you get people participating, they're on a good path for retirement. You'll want to consider that not everyone on your team is going to have access to the same resources. Some people might have a personal financial advisor, others don't. So you want to look for those, like the support from your plan to help everybody enroll in it.
The one thing I will say is that these are, either one of these issues, the issue of saving and financial security and the issue of inclusivity, these are obviously not easy topics to cover. And so if any of you would like to ask questions or continue the conversation or bounce some ideas off Joan or myself, we're very passionate about this topic, as I hope you can see. And so we would love to talk to you and support you. So we've added our email addresses here if anyone has any questions or would like to follow up. Great. Well, thank you very much. If there's no further questions, we're glad to have had the chance to spend a bit of time with you, and hope you have a great rest of your conference.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your time.